Mr. J first started stalking me when I was 13. He never approached me, he never tried to touch me or interact with me, but he was always there, in a nice bike and wearing aviator sunglasses. When Dad dropped me off at school, then when I took the bus back home. When I went to the bodega 2 blocks away, buy a popsicle and before and after church. Sometimes under my window at night, his steps muffled by the distant sounds of coyotes. He never tried to break in. He never tried elaborated tricks to fetch me from school because he was already without a doubt an adult, or pretending he was a door-to-door salesman at my house or anything like that. He was just there, always there. The only times I ever heard him was at night. Sometimes he'd whisper, "Sleep well, sweet angel." And I did. For over a year, I never realized how odd it was to have an unknown man be wherever I'd go. I had learned at church that we all have guardian angels, so in my youthful mind, maybe that was mine. It was only after Paula Jean's stalker was arrested that I realized what that actually was. Paula Jean was one of those girls that seemed to be born to suffer in the kind of world that we live in. Her body was becoming adult too fast, while her mind was still childish, way more than the rest of us 13-year-olds. A dangerous combination. Thank goodness the worst didn't happen. But her stalker, a bald, repulsive man in his 50s, managed to grope her before someone called the police on him. As a girl who learned that her body was sinful, I think she never recovered from it. One of the teachers decided to have the talk with us girls. Pretty much, if you notice an older man following you, please let your parents or teachers know. If they follow you on the street and you're near a police station, go to it. And if not, enter a shop so you'll be a little more protected by the people inside. You're helpless if you don't surround yourself with reliable adults. It wasn't a lot, but considering it was over 20 years ago, it was almost progressive. Miss G never said it was our fault. She just said we needed to be careful and taught us how to recognize a stalker. I think that the man in aviator sunglasses is stalking me, I told my best friend Annie, after what our teacher said. I really liked Annie, but she was one of those girls whose perception of love and passion was already ruined by cheesy books like Julia and Sabrina that she borrowed from her older sister. You know the ones. I don't think so. He's young and handsome and he never tried to grab your breasts. Maybe you'll date him when you're older. Are you crazy? He's a stalker, I replied, getting used to the word. Now being watched by him felt wrong, dangerous even. He's kind of dreamy. Don't you think he looks a little like Ryan Philippe? I ignored Annie and told my parents about the potential threat. After that, I changed schools a lot, multiple times a year. I barely bothered making friends anymore. I went to 2 other schools in my city, then was sent to spend the next year with my paternal grandparents. Mr. J, a nickname one of my few friends came up with, still relentlessly showed up everywhere I went, even in another town, but was careful enough to not attract other people's attention. Since he was young and good-looking, and always kept his distance, the police or my relatives never took it too seriously. My problems seemed like a mere nuisance to them, so much that I almost convinced myself again that only I could see Mr. J. After living with my dad's parents for a while, I stayed with my maternal grandmother, then with a myriad of aunts from both sides. I tried to behave and never bother anyone, but it also meant that I was always uncomfortable and lonely. Look at those green eyes. He's gorgeous. You should feel lucky, an older cousin told me when I was 15, after she was sent by her mother to keep me company. I wish I could give him my number. Of course, as soon as she tried to approach him, he disappeared. I hated how people just brushed it off as something harmless or even cool, just because my stalker wasn't objectively scary. I decided to go to college in another state. Still, Mr. J was always nearby. Why was he so obsessed with a common, even ugly young girl like me? Why was he always relocating his whole life to pursue me? I'd never know. Even after I turned 18, and then 21, he never came to me. He just watched from afar. We never, ever talked. His decade of stalking only ended when I was 23 and got a job opportunity in another country. Mr. J didn't follow me to Europe. For the first time in my life, I was actually free. I didn't feel followed. I didn't listen to footsteps outside my window. I didn't dread seeing that shiny red bike. I never exactly feared him. It was more like the presence of a ghost. always making you anxious, always making soft noises so you know it's there, always looming. An all-seeing eye, looking through all your vulnerabilities. From ages 23 to 29, I lived as normally as I could, and I spent my time focusing on my career, personal growth, and therapy. I didn't travel a lot because I feared that my stalker would come back, and I never have time to fall in love. But that was about to change. I met Tiago through work in a conference. He was from another branch and I was tasked with showing him around. We clicked immediately. I couldn't believe that a successful man with mesmerizing emerald eyes and lovely Spanish accent could fall for me. But it was all so natural. Our love was inevitable. We were meant to be. We couldn't stand to be away from each other, even during the first few days. We were always on the phone, chatting online, or together. I never felt such a connection with anyone, nor thought it would even be possible. My therapist was so proud that I finally opened up for love. Tiago and I got married exactly 1 year after we first met, and we lived together for 7 happy years. We got ourselves a nice house, a dog, and a beautiful son, and his family loved me. I never had a lot of contact with mine after I left the US, but after being so well received, I barely missed them anymore. There's no doubt that those were the best years of my life, but like all good things, it was bound to end, abruptly and in the worst possible way. 2 weeks ago, my beloved husband died in a motorcycle accident. I was a mess. Our time together had been so precious to me. We never fought because we were so alike, like we knew each other our whole lives. Every day with him was blissful, and with him gone, I barely had any strength to pull myself from the bed. His family helped a lot, especially with the house, the dog, and the baby. Once my pride and joy, now they were just shadows of the perfect life I'd never have again. As we mourned together, his mother went through old photo albums with me, her own way to keep him alive in memory. She said Tiago had always been handsome, but it became even more noticeable after his plastic surgeries. I didn't know that he had any. It was after another motorcycle accident, but he didn't like to talk about it. I guess he was 35 when it happened, so not long before meeting you. Did he change a lot? He was barely recognizable, but it couldn't be helped since his face suffered some bone damage. She then showed me my husband in his childhood. First birthday, first tricycle, loss of first baby teeth. The pictures progressed in chronological order, and as he entered his teens, he started to show how handsome he'd be. They became sparser too. He went to study abroad when he was 15, so I don't have a lot from that time. My mother-in-law apologized. I froze when I saw 2 pictures of Tiago from when he was 20. I knew those sunglasses and that red bike very well. That red. Story 2. I had a stalker once I met Jeff when I transferred departments at my job. I was working nights and decided to make a change when I got engaged to my now husband. I figured after we got married, we would soon start a family. The switch was easy besides my sleep schedule being a mess, but that was an adjustment like anything else. I started to get to know my new coworkers one by one. Even though I know most of them through just walking around the office for the past few years, these were now the people I would see every day, so I figured I'd start off on the right foot and be nice to everyone. Jeff is known around the office as a really odd guy, to put it nicely. I mean, that's putting it too nice, to be honest. But of course, me being me, I was nice to him. We have a lot in common, which was why it was easy to start up a conversation one day when it was just the 2 of us. So, nerd alert, I play WoW, World of Warcraft. I've been playing since like 2008, so of course I have a cheesy sticker on my monitor, and he happened to notice it. You play WoW? Seriously, I would have never taken you for a gamer chick. He laughed as he turned to face me. Yeah, I actually have a guild and everything. I bragged. I noticed when I turned to face him how truly unattractive he was. I know that sounds shallow, but he really wasn't anything to look at. Then I noticed he really wasn't looking at me. He was staring at my chest. This obviously made me super uncomfortable, but hey, he's a guy, and I'm sure he doesn't get much attention from the ladies, so I just ignored it. I looked away and at the clock and noticed it was my time to leave. I packed up my stuff, said goodnight, and headed home. By the time I got home, I totally forgot about work. I was heading downstairs to hop on my PC when I heard my phone chime. I had a new friend request on Facebook. It was Jeff. I stared at my phone for a minute and debated whether I wanted to accept his request, and then another chime. One new message on Messenger. Again, it was Jeff. Hey Sammy, sorry to blow up your Facebook, but I'm looking for a new guild and thought maybe you could invite me to yours. Ugh, what a weirdo. First of all, my name is Samantha. Why would he just take the liberty of calling me Sammy, like he was a friend of mine? Second, we only talked one time for like half a second about WoW, and he wants to join my guild? I thought that was creepy, but again I looked past his awkwardness. I accepted his message and added him to my guild out of pity. After that day, Jeff was constantly talking to me, staring at me, and just being all the way around creepy. I hated how I could feel him looking at me when I wasn't looking. Nothing that I couldn't handle. I know that some guys are just socially awkward, but I was always talking about my fiance, so I figured he'd get the point. At some point, I had given him my number because I needed to leave early, and I wanted to make sure that he could get into contact with me if anything happened. That was the biggest mistake I made. After he got my number, he was texting me all the time, asking if I wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons, or if I wanted to hang out and get coffee. If I didn't text him back, he would ask me why I never answered him, like I was his girlfriend or something. Honestly, it was getting overwhelming. Then one day he came in with a present and put it on my desk. What is this? I asked, confused. It's just because, silly, he said with a weight, a big smile on his face. I opened it up cautiously, and inside was a pair of earrings. I almost gagged. Thanks, but I can't accept this. What? Why? He looked completely heartbroken, and that's when I knew this had all gone way too far. I gave him back the box and left to go home. When I got home, there were 10 text messages from him asking me what was wrong and why I couldn't accept the gift. It totally freaked me out. I went and blocked him from all the social media I could and planned on sending an email to HR the next morning. Thank goodness he doesn't come in until later in the day. I planned on talking to my manager about the whole situation. I sent my email to HR and sent them the harassing messages, told them about the unwanted gift and the constant staring at me like I was a piece of meat. HR responded immediately and told me not to worry, that they would handle the situation. I found out later that day that they called Jeff and terminated him. Apparently, my company doesn't take harassment lightly. They told me if anything progressed that I should probably consider going to the police. That worried me a lot. I figured he must have been furious about losing his job, so I decided I would start carrying my knife on me. I grew up in a not-so-great area, so I always had a small collection of knives as a just-in-case. Everything pretty much went back to normal for the next few weeks until I got a text from an unknown number one day at work. I was working overtime, so I was there super late. I don't understand how you could have done this to me. I thought we had something special. You're a terrible person, and I have one last thing to give you. I flipped out and called my fiance and told him what happened. He told me to leave and we would go to the police station and file a report. I calmed myself down and headed to the now dark parking lot, knife in hand. I got to my car and froze. There he was, standing behind my car, holding something small and black. I screamed and rushed at him with my knife, not thinking twice. I stabbed him, fear fueling my hand. I don't know how many times I stabbed him. By the time I was done, his green shirt he wore every other day was a deep red color. I was crying and screaming, and I saw people gathering at the window. That's when I saw it. The little black notebook with the words Jeff's Journal scribbled onto the front. I picked it up and tucked it into my shirt and started running for the office. They called the police, and since everyone knew the situation, it was deemed self-defense. He was a crazed stalker and I was his victim. That's all there was to it. No case, no investigation, no nothing. Only I know the terrible truth. Only I read his journal. I'm the one who knows how happy he was to make his first real friend. How he had never talked to anyone in the office or outside of the office for that matter. How he thought of me as his best friend and that he was so excited to go to my wedding. He thought maybe I'd even have him in it, standing next to my husband. He talked about how excited he was to give me the Star Wars earrings he found. He just knew I'd love them. Then I turned on him, I shunned him. I destroyed his life when I got him fired. He was going to lose his place because he couldn't find a new job. He wanted me to read his journal, his most private piece of his life, to prove that he was my friend. I don't know what to do or how to feel. How could I have been so stupid? He was just an awkward guy and I killed him. I killed him like some crazy person. I can't tell anyone the truth about my stalker. I'll lose everything. Story 3, I just wanted to go home. I had been walking home after the late shift with my head down in that post-work days where all you can really think of is eating some food and vegging out when I met her. "Oh, there you are, babe." I turned around to see a pretty young woman rushing toward me, arms wide open. I stumbled back as she wrapped herself around me, my hands still stuffed in my jacket pockets. "Please help me. Someone is following me," she whispered, looking up at me with panic in her eyes. I glanced behind her and saw a silhouette approach, then paused just before they entered the glow of a streetlight. "Do you see?" she hissed, releasing her grip on me. "Yeah, ... I murmured, staring straight at the person to let them know I could see them. I hoped this would be enough to turn them away, but they remained motionless. "Will you walk me to my place? It's not far, I promise," she asked. "Yeah, of course." I didn't like turning my back on her pursuer. As we walked, I strained my ears to listen for approaching footsteps. Every so often I glanced back, unnerved to see them each time, always avoiding the light and standing in the shadows, still and silent. "Are they still there?" She tugged on my sleeve. "Yeah, they are. Listen, I don't know if we should walk straight to your place. Then they'll know where you live," I said, stealing another glance behind us. "We should try to lose them somehow." She looked up at me, and I watched her cycle through expressions as she tried to decide if I was trustworthy. "We can go to a place with more people around," I added, hoping I hadn't alarmed her. "Look, there's a diner a few streets over. We can sit down, wait a while, make sure the coast is clear before we leave. You hungry?" "Number. But that's fine with me, it's freezing out here," she replied after a few moments. We crossed the street at the next intersection. I looked back to see the figure still standing on the other side, watching as we disappeared around a corner. I quickened the pace, practically dragging her along. Once we made it inside the relative safety of the diner, I picked us a booth away from the windows, but at an angle that I would be able to see if anyone walked by. After our waitress dropped off our menus and glasses of water, my new acquaintance appeared to relax a bit, though her hands were still so shaky that she had to use both of them to sip her water. We sat in silence, and I kept my eyes on the window. "I'm really sorry I ruined your night," she blurted after a while. I panicked." No, not at all. Totally fine. I'm glad you said something. That was definitely sketchy," I assured her. She looked down at the table, and we went back to uncomfortable silence. Not wanting to keep her from getting home, I eventually came up with a suggestion. "Look, I could call you a cab or something, get you a ride home. That way you know that creep won't be able to follow you." She didn't look up and address the table. Her response took me aback. "I don't know if it would even matter." "What do you mean?" She sighed, bringing her hands to her face and rubbing her eyes. "It will still be out there somewhere." "It?" She spread her fingers open, peering at me from behind them. "Yes, it. Them. I don't know anymore." "Okay, look, how about you fill me in on what exactly is going on here?" I snapped. She dropped her hands, her lip quivered like she was fighting back tears. I softened my expression and apologized, but she waved it off. They were far away when it started, far enough that I didn't think much of it. Just someone in the corner of my eye, really. At first I thought it was just me imagining things. It took a while for me to realize that I was being stalked. I narrowed my eyes at her, wondering just what I'd gotten myself involved with. It just kept getting closer. She continued, It got so close, I could almost see it clearly, and I knew it. It wasn't right. The situation was taking a turn I hadn't anticipated. There was no denying that someone appeared to be following her, but the rest of her story made me question her lucidity. I chose my next words carefully. "Why don't you tell me what you think you saw, and I'll try to help you. And if I can't, I'll find someone that can." She pulled back instantly, regarding me suspiciously. "I'm not crazy. I know what I saw," she replied sharply. "All I'm saying is that your eyes can play tricks on you when you're afraid," I countered. "No, it wasn't human. It was like it was the absence of a person, Like where someone should have been, there was just no one. I was so scared, and I knew it couldn't be real. But then, you saw it too. I did see someone. That part is accurate. But I didn't see anything that made me think that they were made. I trailed off as something caught my peripherals. Outside the window, there had been a nearly imperceptible movement. But as I squinted toward it, I could make out the vague outline of a figure in the alley across the street. She followed my gaze, twisting in her seat. "It's there, isn't it?" she breathed. I nodded, gritting my teeth. "Wait here," I said, rising from the booth. "No, don't go out there," she exclaimed, her eyes wide. I ignored her and pushed through the door, adrenaline pumping through me. "Hey, I can see you," I called, entering the road, my knuckles curling. The silhouette stood its ground. I was nearly across the road when headlights approached, washing over me just before the vehicle swerved out of the way. "Get out of the road, asshole!" The driver yelled out the window before blaring the horn and speeding away. In those few moments, her stalker had managed to disappear from sight. I scanned the darkened alley, moving forward cautiously, expecting them to leap out at me at any second. But there was no one there, and there was no one on the sidewalk either. For the first time that night, I felt genuine fear. I hustled back to the diner, this time checking for traffic first. As I approached the door, I found the booth sitting empty. A wad of crumpled bills sat on the edge of the table. Cursing, I searched the streets for any sign of her, to no avail. It had been an unsettling night, and by then I was completely baffled. What exactly had happened? I forced myself to slow down and assess things logically. I didn't really know what to think. I could almost have written it off as the antics of a very paranoid woman, except for the fact that there had definitely been somebody in the alley, and it did appear that they had been following her. Then I realized that I had never gotten her name. She hadn't asked mine, and I hadn't asked hers. This seemed odd to me, considering the bizarre interaction we had just shared. Was this some kind of elaborate con? Had she been working with someone else to distract me? My mind went back to how off guard I'd been when she embraced me, and I felt for my wallet. It was still there, and everything was still inside it, so she hadn't robbed me. Still, the whole thing didn't sit right with me. I couldn't let it go, so I decided to wander the streets in the hopes that I'd catch sight of her again. I pulled my hood tight and headed back in the direction we had come from, still trying to piece the puzzle of this evening together as I trudged along. I hadn't been walking for very long when I saw a group of friends smoking outside of a pub. "Hey, excuse me," I greeted them as I approached. "You didn't happen to see a friend of mine go by?" I had been trying to think of the best way to describe her, but the group ignored my presence entirely and continued to joke among themselves. "Excuse me, sorry to bother you all," I tried again, "but I'm looking for someone who..." There was a murmured agreement that they should head back in, that it was too cold to stand out there any longer, and with that they filed back inside without so much as a glance in my direction. Everything about this evening had been off, but this was unbelievable. There was just no reason for an entire group of people to pretend I didn't exist. Or was there? It was the absence of a person. I froze, her words entering my brain suddenly. But that was preposterous, wasn't it? I peered at my reflection in the pub window, certain of my existence. But now I was overcome with the need to get someone to acknowledge me. I reached for the pub door. I could feel it in my hand, but it wouldn't budge. I pushed and pulled, but the door wouldn't open from either direction. I'd have thought it was locked if I hadn't just seen it swing open seconds before. It was then that I knew something was wrong. Whatever this world is, whatever plane of existence I had come from, I quickly realized that I was not a part of it anymore. No one could see me, no one could feel me, no one could hear me, and I could no longer interact with any physical objects that I hadn't already been carrying. As the early morning sun began to rise, I was still desperately trying to get someone, anyone's attention. For all my efforts, I was awarded nothing. The most I was able to do was get trapped in my building's stairwell after trying to follow a neighbor inside. To my dismay, I hadn't caught up with them before the door at the top of the stairs swung shut, and I was forced to wait there until another neighbor came down the steps on their way to work. Being outside was better. Even if I could still feel the whipping wind, at least out there I couldn't get stuck anywhere. For the first few days I felt hunger and thirst, but the longer I stayed, the less I felt. Eventually, I grew numb to these sensations. Even the stinging cold became bearable. Gradually, I came to accept my fate, however cruel, however impossible it all seemed. It had probably been weeks. By then, I had lost all sense of time. When I met another like me, I had been sitting in the frozen park late at night, trying to remember what it was like to be real. I didn't react to the shadow that loomed in front of me, expecting it to belong to yet another person who couldn't see me. It was only when it halted that I bothered to look up. They were much like the silhouette I had seen on that fateful night, and my breath caught as I tried to find a face that wasn't there. Something darker than total blackness stared back at me, and I wondered if I appeared the same way to them. "Do you see me?" I tried asking it. "Yes." I nearly choked, searching for words, trying to figure out what question to ask next. What happened to us?" The figure gave a dry laugh. "Seems we're dead, doesn't it?" It had crossed my mind a few times, but hearing someone else say it was worse, only then did it feel real. "But how?" I cried. The stranger snorted. "You mean you don't remember how you died?" Do you?" "Yeah, got lured here, just like you." "What do you mean?" The figure gave a long sigh before sitting beside me on the bench. "Haven't been like this long, have you?" I shook my head. "Well, here's how it works. As you might have noticed, most people can't see you, and you can't do a thing to make them. But there are a couple of exceptions. They're just really rare to come across." "What are the exceptions?" "Well, there are the gifted type," it said, pointing a non-finger to the middle of where their forehead would have been. "And then there are folks who are on their way here." "On the way here? Like dead?" "Precisely." I processed this information for a while, trying to think back to the night I disappeared. She'd been able to see the dark figure, and so had I. I drew a sharp breath, the revelation slowly dawning on me. "The car, it must have hit me when—" "Not quite," the stranger interjected. "You never actually died. Whoever took your place managed to swap places with you right before you would have. Right place, right time. Nearly impossible without the help of someone living. So she tricked me." I scoffed, incredulous. Why would she do that to me?" "Who knows, eh? People do crazy things for all sorts of reasons, you know? Point is, don't bother dwelling on reasons here. They don't matter much. Good luck finding your way back. Not many of us ever do." With that, the absence of a person strode away, leaving me to come to grips with what I'd been told. I knew I'd never find her again. Whoever she was, whatever she wanted, it didn't matter. She had gotten what she needed, and she was long gone. It took some time, but I learned that I had to accept that. I learned that I had to let it go. It seemed the only way I'd ever make it back was to remain vigilant, to notice anyone who gave me the slightest glance. So I wandered, aimless, directionless. For how long, I can't say. Time doesn't really seem to matter as much here. You kind of forget about it after a while. All I can say is that one day my efforts paid off. One day I found my ticket back, after searching for so long. So I thank you, my friend, for the opportunity. I hope that you find your way back someday. Find your way.